사신 베지 주지 멘도 자 지라는 시니 된견본데 상계 신도 미데 베바이 주변 남다 신다 주버 쇼이 담아 우르라 나면 자랑군이 안다야메 다단다 그저 개념 중에 두소 kuranzu mingji ni tariche shiyu mingdi tsabada ni kuranzu pyujuche ani tarenga kuranzu genye rubya ani kasukure da gyabsum tsimbi genyes didruwa mato ani labshi da kasukure labshi tsimbi genye didre kemembache danyang ko labshi tsimbi genye diyan shugla kan drupna digirwa dadanda di gyabsum tsimbi genyes shije da jamnya kunjusum yang ta bor kelebe tone ani ngaranzu kondojido ani jige ni lensum chungna ni lensum chen lensum ani karsoureda jamjugi ni gojugi labjala ya to si samlo to stand hoina ta kelende masona zo tire te shuma yang chananzu di dozi ya wo chungzabe shula arba niwa de paramana ani labji 다지 시가 가져 배제했다. 그냥 창조다. 저 관리 정도 주는 인디미요.
So Rinpoche love she said the only share
아주 시. 말을 탄다. 소저 데들 소저 딱 되죠.
So after the second session of teaching this morning, then a certain number of people took the sort of Pratimoksha vows from me. But those Pratimoksha vows have a the lay vows, the Pratimoksha lay vows, but they have two sort of levels. And one of them is a sort of level which is taken in terms of the precept of accepting the three refuges, purely accepting the three refuges of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha as sort of valid refuges, and then taking the vows on that basis. And then the second level of those is to, on the basis of taking very specific vows, so choosing from amongst the five sort of vows of practice, and then choosing, usually one or two or three or four or all of them, the complete vows. That's what's called a sort of basic. I think it's the basis of training, which is the choosing very specific vows, making promises to accept the very specific vows. So that's the sort of second stage. So the first stage given today was this one, just purely sort of taking Pratimoksha vows in terms of observing the sort of activities of our body, speech, and mind, and also Ayaki will give some advice related to this, and I will prepare the names for those people who receive those vows. But this just to explain what was happening earlier.
트란슈기 아주 아니 더 쳐버져버디 온도 당체 더 되네 대별하라 차절 태좀 탐제 방저신 룰는데 제주 차 시제다 니조 조지바데 아디샤 라니 아니 가서 그랬다 퇴바망도 퇴바다 삼밥 망도 저비 디톱기 아니 딩주던 때문에 토네 응아란 줄이야 아니 퇴바다 삼바티기 왕기 다 태좀 탐제 방바지 제투에 연구에도 전에 아니 루발라 낸덴시에 쳐도 아니 예발도 태좀 탐제 방바를 차고 요리스 아니 디 제소 루발라 낸덴치고로 예시도 전에 당아란 줄이야 템발이야 주보이나 주당데 랍제치 연구였으리
And so here, this starting up, we talked about the homage earlier on, the homage to great compassion and the homage to the teachers. But then moving on to the sort of first verse of the first verse, where in the first verse, the great Atiśa, who is obviously engaged in a tremendous amount of listening to the teachings and also contemplating those teachings, and on the basis of that teachings, he has cleared away all of his doubts. And so this is kind of form of expression of worship in the text, really, a sort of part of the text we could call the expression of worship. So he has the confidence to have cleared away all of his doubts and to really then talk about how to sort of dedicatedly or very earnestly strive in accomplishing and accomplishing the practices based on his tremendous amount of hearing and contemplation. So actually getting sort of a meditative accomplishment of the things that he's listened to. So here in that first verse, it says, discard all lingering doubts and strive with dedication in your practice at the beginning, the first two lines of verse 1.
제장가다 줍을 낸된 제수 차선 단다 줍세디 줍야디 가르 줍부 요르세도 아란주 유지 아니 아란주 지기 전불링 순르질이 있나요? 아니 가르서 그래 닝지매봐 매교스럽지래 차상 닝지요 제장가 덴지 닝지디 자월 샤제 덴지 닝지디 공배도 땅치 아니 공배 땅땅대양 그 땡기 다나 쇼게 추드 쉬브레 제장가 말한저 장된도 동해 직 동해의 섬 동해기 자와 가리기 치기도 세 삼로데 kumchi yawo jachi ani dinde chi da chena chimarong nyambe lo de yang yang do yoba chi che di tabu jabe susu gergi tonda tre ta shengen shendeng de do di samlo tang do jambe telling jis jajang pebeg chi de na lo la ninjung da ningji ni di kapalo chulo res jajang inji na lo la self confession na lagu do di pebe na yo ma se jajang pebe na pege na lo ya 저 가르치기 어려서나 ninjung randen도 동행 삼지 딜라 타는 지모롱 냠베 삼로 양내양도 깨온데 ninjung 아니 딘데디 셴댕을 삼도 닝지세 디안 닝지문을 줘 어딘데지 삼로지 밸런스 따다 로지 데토비나 아니 제장가 아니 신이 가르쳐 그래 딜리 땜베 아니 퇴삼로서 뭐 채원도 좀 둘는데 제수차 디간 태좀매버데 쇠고 요레스
And so here it talks about, it uses this word which doesn't come across in the translation, but it says discard all lingering doubts and strive with dedication in your practice. But there's a very specific meaning to the word tuba in the Tibetan, tubala, so the accomplishment or the sort of experiential accomplishment of those things and of the practices. So by clearing away the doubts, we're able to strive and we're able to strive. So in that practice, and so one of the sort of important ways of striving in that practice is to do with compassion and increasing and strengthening our compassion, and the way to do that, which is something that I mentioned earlier in the morning session. And in some ways that sort of wish, taking the sort of generic wish that of looking at suffering and saying, wouldn't it be wonderful if I could be separated or free from that kind of suffering? And then if that sort of kind of mind is focused in on ourselves, and we understand all of the reasons, all of the complexity of our suffering and all of the reasons why we're suffering, and then think wouldn't it be wonderful if I could be free of that? That's our kind of sort of personal, almost our personal business. That's our a sort of a personal compassion focused on ourselves, and then and so what we could also in some sense turn to be renunciation. Whereas if we then also focus that feeling of wouldn't it be wonderful if the suffering could be free and separate from the suffering, and then that is focused on all others, then that becomes what we would call, in a sense, real compassion for others. And that what we actually need is a balance of these two, and then without doubts we can engage in the practices of accomplishing these practices.
아니 시부지기 소소리야 교코치 통고요 레스월 다디 개침부레세 지 샤바정기 핑거요 디 개침부디 알라 메네 메타메버지레 샤세디 수고도 제세디 젠제스 봐 젠제스 샤단디 아니 반덴 다와 잡외기 우마 주베기나 롤이야 아니 닝지디 아주 시부지기 다보자부레스 가전스나 디 토마르크 개체와 바르도 개체와 타마르 개체와 샤스 토망 아주 개체와디 사변나시 아주 드링 아주 빼나 개념 동바르지 슈제 접순스비 개념 동바 슈제 아니 상제기 템벌다 고주고레 슬라반나시 닝제 다보지 잡고요 잠베 되네 아니 알아도 동면 타래게 삼로데다 되네 다보 잡아봐 제장가 대인도 잠베 사변다 부르샤스 되네 바르도 추다 부르샤스 그 추다 부르셔서는 양내 양도 닝지 돌려 삼도 양내 양도 뽑았는데 베톤 삼도 양내 양도 다운도 잠베 동해 먹고 싶으지 되네마 지금 뽑았는데 베톤에마 지금 절줘야다 타르도야지다 디리리 심슈리 개원도 잠베 아조만 손에 다 장고셰베나 때야다 가데가데 파라가데 파라삼가데 부더이 소야세디 닝지 슈다 닝중 슈기 잡고르바 잡야디 저장갖고 추다 부르셨어 다 타마디 아니 리구민 바다고 시도점에 타마산지 고반 톱잡에 있나야 아니 매 년전 두두도 심정이 돈다 깔려 잡혀야 돼 가르에서는 닝지 준비 상황들이 샤스 다디 인도점에 닝지되면 메타메버샤스 대지 인도점에 줄런nen된 제수차스 다 랍잡 중요스래요.
And so what this in this line is sort of saying in terms of really striving earnestly to accomplish the practices, and particularly what I'm focusing on here is the practice of developing compassion as a real sort of grounding basis, the sort of the lowest common denominator, the lowest limit for which we should have in our practice in order to have our practice to be a complete practice. And so it's a sort of strive with dedication, with sort of care and dedication in our practice, and earnestly practice. But this is particularly here we have to talk about when we talk about practices, sometimes we think about them as we sort of think of them as being how fantastic they are, how great they are, how important they are. But we really need to understand what is the value. It's not enough to just say something is so amazing or so important or valuable. We have to understand why it's valuable. So in relating this in terms of the great importance of compassion in our practice, as Chandrakirti says in his Entering the Middle Way, there's a verse where he talks about compassion being important in the beginning, in the middle, and in the end. And in the beginning, it talks about compassion being important in the sense of the compassion being a seed. And so, for instance, here today I gave this sort of the lay pratimoksha vows based on the sort of taking on the sort of acceptance of the refuge in the three jewels, that form of, and that kind of a vow or practice acts as a seed, which is like a gateway or a doorway to that leads us a doorway through to the Buddhist path, leads us on to the Buddhist path, and then and seeing, and this also, in terms of the compassion, this is also understanding all of the kind of varieties of suffering that we ourselves and others undergo, and seeing how they are and wishing to be free from them. Then in the middle, that's at the beginning of our practice, like a seed. Then in the middle, it's described, compassion is described like the water to nourish or moisten our practice, and to to moisten our practice, and therefore therefore again, so this is like again and again thinking about the need to attain to be able to attain liberation, to be free from suffering, and this follows the sort of structure of the path: Tayata Gati Gati Parasam Gati, and at the end it's like ripening. The compassion is like ripening the fruit, where the Buddha day and night, constantly under the power of compassion, works for the welfare of all beings.
다테네 딘데지기 아니 지기 가서 그래 닝지려야 쇼 젠데 체제 다고 잡대 갑려야 다 발지 지슈데 아니 남샤 준도 아니 소소소소려야 냠낸 쳐발라 바르도 쥐킹기 아니 다 쥐바드니 방법이오래 빼나 다니 니무다 아니 레로 니무세도 다 쪼베 가서 꽃배 천지를 지래 니세디 디배 배천 천바치 부채 라서보다 대나로랑 알아서 지기 가서 그랬다 최 제발이야 또 파텐로년치 또 매버스니 컨트리 지기 이나양 한 대다 탐제 rap봉싱스 rap봉버스도 선배 카도 샤토나 삼다 초보진 도스 파 샤토버지 국지스 rap봉싱스 다도 든데지 샤토버이나 다도 준주 방자싱 다도 준주 배버차스도 주드 지위게지리 든지기 남샤준도 니를 가보 여디냐 남샤준도 투주털라 땅야 망고 지그 샤왕론로더니 디기 아니 신의 닝지디 땅 아니 든지기 냠내인데 땅에 네바지 템바지 마스나 땅에 미지 베데코라 간제스 제지 제베 이나야 아니 딜이야 이면제 케메도 디 냠내데 맨나가 차송세 삼로 딜레 원도 신의 란 저기 렐로드랑 신기 렐로로 삼로시라 땅 먹어봐 지기 바르제드 졸리 삼로시라 땅 먹어봐 돈에 개월로 쪼와디 슈싱부지 레온도 잠베 랑신기 쪼와로 슈 잡디 그리마도 당아 디 친이데 두고도 데 당야디 제라사 말에 삼야디 자원인 리그 말와 제장가 아란주 준주기 친이들이야 아니 어디 개월로 쪼세지 마도 요 말에 제장가 개월로 쪼와디 준주 친이래 엔 저기 배저세들이 디나로 순고 말에 제장가 준주기 친이디 가르레스도 좀베 아니 개월로 쪼와디 준주기 친이 샤오래 디베 나와도 보여.
So here, one very important factor. So then moving on to the third and fourth lines of the translation. The third and fourth lines of the translation. And it says, where thoroughly relinquish sloth, mental dullness, and laziness, and strive always with joyful perseverance. So here is sort of so having sort of in the first lines, particularly talking about, because it references compassion, and particularly talking about the great importance of taking hold of compassion, sort of bringing it into our lives and practice, and taking responsibility in that way of developing compassion. And then on the basis of that, the main sort of obstacles, the main factors which sort of get in the way of our practice are then described below. Although these are examples of the kind of things which tend to sort of get in the way of our practice, to cause obstacles to that. So we have sloth, mental dullness, laziness, also such things as sleep. So these are just a few examples, but what we can also talk about that in a way is anything which takes away or eliminates our delight in doing practice. And so what we have to do, it says, always strive with joyful perseverance and thoroughly relinquish those negative factors. So that sort of means to sort of keep them as far away from our mind as possible. And then what this describes is this line 3, thoroughly relinquish sloth, mental dullness, and laziness, is a kind of a causal relationship there's a cause and effect relationship between lines 3 and 4. And so here, for those who really love to sleep a lot, who end up in wasting a lot of their time, it means that they're not able to get the sort of maximum potential out of the compassion that which they wish to develop. And so here, if we're able to sort of almost sort of directly strive in joyful perseverance, which is actually better translated as joyous effort, then the laziness will naturally reduce. And these thoughts of, well, I can't get this done, I can't do that, will naturally subside. And it's very important that the definition of joyous effort is delight in virtue. That's the definition of joyous effort. It doesn't talk about striving and making great effort. It talks about delighting in virtue. And that's something that we need to directly cultivate.
Because I'm full of laziness, so then, because if somebody tells me to do something, push me or pressure me, I don't like that. I think most of us don't like that. Nobody likes that. But then somehow I know that through this laziness, what I am not really going on a positive side. At the same time, I can feel this. Like the whole time I play a game, watch a football match, spend a tremendous time with the amount, so much time with my friends. But at the end of the fun, when the party is over, then I always try to say, did I had a really great time? Then I cannot answer that. But then automatically I felt like, yes, I did kind of waste quite a time. But then there is a bit kind of a regret, but not a full regret, because I don't have something better things to do. So that is my, so the great masters, when they talk about actually when they're now thinking on the Tibetan terminology, then it's saying that in English it's a little bit funny because joyous effort, because there's effort. So then that, why that there's a strong word joy, and what we are really trying to do, the practices, or trying to be patient, bring compassion, renunciation, there's no joy. The joy is gone. I feel like, I think it's important. Because my master told me that, okay, I will practice. It's more like it's not naturally coming from your wish or your will is there. So then when I first heard the definition of the joyous effort in Tibetan, then it is the joyous, enthusiastic on the virtues.
Delight in virtue.
Virtues did. That is something I liked very much. And then I felt like, wow, that's why Shantideva the Great, when he wrote the book of the way of Bodhisattva's life, he came up with the idea full of advertisement, saying the benefits of bodhicitta. So he's the one who did the first bodhicitta business. Very well. So that's very great, So that's why His Holiness, when every time he says that I gone through like quite a difficult time from a young age, then in the Tibet situation, the whole world situation, then what to do? Feel sometimes very helpless. Then I boost up again, once again, as the great Shantideva says, now there's no time to be sad, because now you have to ride on this horse of the bodhicitta and then move forward. And who else will do? I will do it. So it's moving forward. So His Holiness always quote this Shantideva's text. So it's similar that the main booster for the bodhicitta is time to time when you can bring the joy. And similarly, other practices. All other things that we normally don't enjoy our practices, like we are missing the joy, we are missing the fun of the practice. Like Melareba, he was having such a great fun in his cave. But people from outside go like, oh, what a miserable life. Buddha Shakyamuni same, 6 years under the tree without a huge kind of extreme practice. Oh, people might not enjoy the scene, but they really don't know how much that Buddha before Siddhartha was enjoying is under the tree, Bodhi tree. Those are the things that we need to research how to bring the joy into the practice. So similarly here, the great Atiśa is giving us a hint in order to bring the bodhicitta. Then first you need to day and night appreciate that even you have a little bit of not a very effective compassion, but what you just have a little bit, you really need to keep it and appreciate it so much, rejoice so much. And then slowly everything will come out. That's what he's hinting.
So just to cover a little bit, as I had to rush in the last one, so there's this sort of relationship between sloth and sort of relinquishing the sloth, the dullness, all of these negative factors that carry away our delight, and then driving to striving in this joy, what's called joyous in the text, joyful perseverance, which is sometimes enthusiastic perseverance or joy, but I like to translate it as joyous effort, which is, and the definition of that as given in Shantideva's text is taking delight in virtue. That's the definition of what it means to joyous effort. So it's or perseverance. So it doesn't have so much of that connotation of striving and making great effort or really persevering, in the sense it's more this sense of delight in taking delight in virtuous things, which then helps us to overcome our laziness, the way in which we put things off, the way we sort of also feel that we're not going to get that done, it's going to be too difficult, I can't get that done, or and then sort of end up putting things off or wasting time in these things such as sloth. So it's focusing directly on trying to bring a sense of delight in virtue is what helps us to overcome those factors which carry away our sort of delight and therefore our practice of virtue.
다다도 준비해봐 차스 다다도 준비 dindeji gewala towa shukchumbu jiye debe kala ani chambada shishin payobe shidu 준비 dindeji yo chabe shugola ani semnalo poba chigda dindeji gewa dela poba gewa cheya dela poba da gawa da towa shukchumbu shibuji yedu ani ti tagoja sambol이 봐 ti tagoja sambol에 온도 chambe chamba 양안의 양도 딘제디 니에게 배주 지기도 거에 딩이기 지 송주지 년배이나양 라마디기 최지 송어도 최남면나서 송구래데 이네 디나로랑 알레 펜슈디 다디 닝지 거들 시부지 송송서도 캐는 줘야지 전주 웃으면 따고 싶지 않은 얘기라 신의 직 송주 디가 나로래 전주 웃음 그 거를 내가 송도 시 지기 때문에 대조 참물로 남샤견도 전주 웃음도 짜침부지다 닝질이야 짜침부지다 더 나지 매베이나 가수 송셔는데 고요 말에 막 화야디 가르쳤으나 딜레 쪼와 딜레요 말 쪼와 딩에는 쇠고도 다 쪼와 딜레용도 아니 신에 아니 템바 디용도 점비 엔디냠도 시신 양양도 셈도 잘하지 아니 전다 시신 바요베에서 바요가 된다디 아니 지기 단다 게세 토면 상벽이 송진하노라 바요 세바디 아니 디 고아침부지 디 셈날 편부촌소 랑돌이야 랑자다 더자라 가디네 삽삽치 삼로치 랑자다 더자니를 배 시부지게 삽삽치 삼로치 레용제세지 랑돌라 서바 훌렘바스도 당한 단다 받은 아주 다 용내 용마용은 쓴도 지어르데 바위레서비 슈베 따들이야 냐바르도 생그 소지나 디 용구메도 디파 냠주고도 디야 펠 용구도 쓴 삼로딜레체 아니 딘지 용야데 플렘베 토네 셈바데나로 어디지 들려야 바요스 다 바요에 인장 다디 구지시비요 다디까지는 선도 상만 용왕 토네 송샤죠 인도 잠베 코랑의 용도는 송도 잠베 제전 비tum생 거지 아니 딘지기 쪼와 딘지 여체베 슈고라 아니 참바의 시신의 바요도 용구도 디여베 인장 아니 옹벽고는 따도 송 스르점에 아니 얘기 룽아 유숨기다 민계에 잡아도 저 자원이네 지금에 세야선 딜러 네베 레디 아니 아주 류당아 이 간지지네 얘기 아니 지금은 세야지다 신의 디 내가 지금부터 왔죠.
So here, in terms of so that, and sort of following the flow of the text here in from the first verse into the second verse, where the first, then first verse talks about how developing this strong wish and delight, wish to do virtue, a strong delight in virtue, and sort of thinking about how to sort of using that sort of how to sort of employ that, how to make that how to then sort of engage in delight in virtue and sort of taken hold and allowing these positive states of mind, such as the delight in virtue, to take hold of us, to sort of almost like to take responsibility ourselves for engaging in them. And so sort of looking at whether we are sort of, in a sense, making effort, really sort of engaging in these things in a sort of complete way. So, for instance, if we are, if compassion or bodhicitta, these kinds of virtuous minds take hold of us, take hold in our minds, then whenever we're listening to the teachings of a particular teacher or guru, then we will be under the sway of those the compassion or bodhicitta. We'll be looking for things that they explain to us in the teaching, and that in terms of when they say something about compassion, we sort of immediately notice it and relate to it and think and try to connect with it. The same with bodhicitta. We sort of feel suddenly naturally we'll feel a much greater sense of interest and engagement and a wish to understand more. But if we don't have those, then we don't really hear it. There's no sort of delight in it, or if we do physically hear it, there's no sort of delight or connection with it. But if we have that strong sense of delight in virtue, then these qualities such as mindfulness, mental introspection or mental vigilance, conscientiousness, or sometimes called carefulness, then they start to naturally arise, because we're thinking about how to make effort and how to sort of protect those states of mind. So in terms of this conscientiousness or perhaps carefulness. Gyaltsen Tobme Sambo has this wonderful way of talking about what it means to be careful or to be conscientious, where he says, and this is something I have heard and I find great meaning in it, is to say that conscientiousness is being intent on or make great effort towards, or being intent towards taking care of what is to be adopted in the practices and what is to be abandoned in the practices. So very specifically being careful in that regard. Instead of a kind of state of mind where we feel, oh, well, if these minds arise, it's okay, and if they don't arise, it's kind of okay. There's a strong kind of vigilance where we're watching our minds very carefully to see have these positive states of mind arisen? Are they increasing? Are they declining? And being aware of those. And on the basis of that experience, as the reasons state here, then we're able to not engage in non-virtuous things in our activities and any activities which harm us.
So lasu ta tene onbyo konum ta do sungs chizang kadambe lama chigna ta da lamrim chimana lu yor kadambe lama chigi ta ma nyamle mangwe shibuji che ju yode ta nyegi tanda tujoroso chasang ji eni nyegi lunga yusumgi chawa chadan del de de nyegi nyamlen do dagda ji myon ji tong do zambe ta nye 다른 sonde lega de shambakame 이니 onbyo ko tamche 아니 그 하바도 말한주 sem들이 아니 sem디기 남도당 아니 드라면달로 소바 깨원도 점배 나의 우지 점제 코께 주면서 코끼 맞이나 안할 흘려 신대기인스 얘가 단다 미진나다 단다 가리였으나 락발 디 자과지 케체 디종대디인스 근데 랍자지 여러봐 가담배 손은 어디 저런 다 가지고 차야 돼.
And so then also there's the last two lines of verse 2 where it talks about again and again. So with those constantly guarding the gateways of our senses, particularly, this refers to actually guarding the three doors of the body, speech, and also of our mind against virtuous action. So protecting us from the sort of awareness of what's going on in our minds and our physical actions and our speech to see whether they're non-virtuous, and making sure that we're sort of really having that sense, I don't want to get involved with any of these activities of body, speech, and mind which are harmful. And this is actually stated in Lamrim Chenmo, where it quotes the Kadampa masters as saying, the Kadampa master, one of the Kadampa masters saying, I've done tremendous amount of practice, but out of all of those practices, the main focus of my time is nothing other than to sort of stand guard at the doorway of at the sort of gateway of my three doors of the body, speech, and mind, and protecting, particularly sort of protecting myself in relation to negative actions and sort of tying up or binding up in my mind so that it doesn't get scattered away to sort of scattered sort of thoughts about all kinds of things, and how I will only relax if my mind is not engaged in those things. So I stand kind of vigilant at the doorways of my body, speech, and mind, and making sure to not allow those to engage in actions of harm or negativity. And so this ties in very clearly here with the second part of the verse. Yeah.
다 되네 인생 두숨 양다 양서 생기규라 생기규라 딱벌 차스 다 인도 점배 저장아주 단다 칸된 게줘도 냐바도 제고그래서야다 라바도 튼주 라면은 줘도 다직 저 되는거에 저 냐바도 냐려야 아주 kumshin jarjuwe chidu jigin sare chizanga di yangne yangdo semgigyula dajeji chegu du zambe du shashana chiro chigmarba chizandi kene cheche eni di sem nalo daje cheche du son rogoyachi di nalo ni di tanda joji di nalo songba na shin eni semgigyula dagor cha se di joji songji nalo ya eni 당마 나로냐 초도 주지 당마 나는 초도 주지 수수샘을 잘해야 돼. 리샤스 수수샘게 나로야 samlo dangdang la do se ta ding ye no ro yu se di samlo dangdang je chu ro yin se di ge samlo di che di so lo je be dangwa di na ro ne rangyu sim gyu la ta je che de cho de jo yin du zhen be ani sim gyu la ta ro chas 아니 따고치 제단데 가르치기로 했으나 나게 네바 다자신 앵예게 된데 견지 수수 견지 제원도 선배 안 신에베 지금다 얘들 노르고도 세제 다고를 시도 선배 지단에 만배버체 마배버체지 수수수소리야 아니 디 가르소를 난기 기회신이스 라바나신지 소소리야 디 얘네 랍지적 도지고 요래 신미 셴바지 주고 용은 나오도 um도가 더 수수수수 주고나 얘네 또 지게 람산 렉 깔깔 하고 요때 얘네 공시지 자원도 다 때문에 전에 기겐하니 기겐 초도 주고 직대 인사래 근데 인도 담배 아니 다기냐바 다 자신 근데 참래야 게 잡질랍나 야고 쉬주스래 저장 얘기 게 참래 아니 수수수수기 삼로 당당 너버데 하고도 준비 년 노샤 대바 잠마인 봐 이게 전부 잡지 간된 게 저 제베 가라네 소소 녀바데 당 수수 눈리 제바도 통원도 준비 디 간된 게저 참지 샤지 아니 게 전부 잡지 되네 베 된리야 라마다 아니 상제의 전주 선바도 검시 아니 라바 태문자지 다 드링에 녀바데 내지 사샤데 되게 도스 셰샤 땅에 알아는 노르고도 아니 알아는에 간도 지도 지기 아니 라마도 세번째로 나시지 어때 게 전부 잡지 되는 쇼팽이 있어요 송구 어때 제제 알아줘 근데 제도에는 야고 용서를 봐 어디 다기냐 봐 자자신세데 디파도 직접
Then looking at the second two lines of verse 2, so then with that the constant guarding of our senses, then again and again 3 times both day and night examine the flow of our thoughts. So again, sort of relating all this to our daily practices, often involving a lot of recitations and sort of virtuous practices, and also such as reciting the 6-session Guru Yoga, all kinds of practices and recitations that we have, and become a kind of habit. But what Atiśa is saying to us here is this is important to check our minds. This is when we're doing these kind of practices, and also in general, we have to sort of examine the flow of our thoughts, to check our minds, because this is the kind of thing. This is the kind of sort of almost like a promise or a thing that we've accepted to do as part of the practice. So in one of his texts, Atiśa mentions how the supreme of all instructions is that of watching our minds and seeing the points at which we're mistaken and the ways in which we are confused in our way of thinking. So how do we do that? Then in the first line of verse 3, it says, "Reveal your own shortcomings." So here, we sort of realizing, not hiding away our faults and mistakes, our mistaken ways of thinking and our sort of faulty conduct, not hiding it away, but being much more open about it, especially at least to ourselves, in the sense we could almost have like an internal spiritual friend who we sort of almost, tries to identify these things, and who we helps us to identify these things, because we hate it when others point out our faults. Everybody hates that when others point out our fault, and we really don't take interest in that or feel comfortable about it. So much better to do it ourselves with a kind of internal spiritual guide, and that's the best kind of teacher, actually. And I had one teacher who sometimes, when he was doing his, sort of practices and recitations, would stop in the middle of the recitation and kind of almost shout out, "Oh, I'm doing this great fault. I'm making this mistake, in his ways of thinking or acting," and would sort of stop the recitations and practice right there and sort of, shout out in a very honest, open way. And then what we can do is, so there is sort of imagine the gurus and the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in front and fold hands and say, "Oh, I've made a kind of confessing that mistake," and then saying to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, "Please," and the gurus, "Please have forbearance with me. Please have patience with me," and feeling a sense of regret or feeling sorry that we've engaged in this way. So this connects with the first line of the third verse where it says, "Reveal your own shortcomings."
אומרים את זה בכל עולם, אנחנו מדברים שבודות ובודhisattva נמצאים מולנו, ובפעמים עליהם אנחנו מוטים בקמים או בבעיות שלנו, ואנחנו מבקשים מהם להיות סבלניים איתם.
됐어. 다 되는 네 오마디 더 신기 추버제베 차스. So this one is pretty hard to practice, bring into practice.
This is the second line. Do not seek out others' errors.
Not looking for others' faults. If we cannot do this, then I think it is very difficult for us to enjoy enjoy gossip. And so most of the time when we meet, first we start with how are you, and then slowly I think 99% it is about somebody else's business. So we really enjoy that. So, and here it is saying, don't look for the others' faults. It looks like, it means like don't look for others' fault, but to be honest, what does that really mean? Here, because the foundation of this text is to preserve, to protect your compassion. Now you need to check. There are so many things we look for the other people's fault. And when we look at other people's fault, then how we conclude our conversation. So then ultimately there could be a hatred, jealousy, all these things becomes very strong. So then how you look to the other people is through the gossip point of view. The great Buddha himself, in the sutra, if you look at it, in the Bodhisattva's way of canon of teachings,
The Bodhisattva Pitaka, or the Bodhisattva Canon of Teachings.
Kindness of the mother sentient beings. But he never talks about that particular person has given me such a hard time in many lifetimes. Never. With one answer, he said something. They have done it because they are under the sway of the negative emotions. Period. But the rest, all this kindness, then he bring into practice every time, just thinking, look at how much this even newborn baby of the bird, how much that she really protects that her own kid. All this innate compassion, love, warm-heartedness. So Buddha talks so much about this to bring the bodhicitta towards us. Seeing the kindness of the mother sentient being and repaying the kindness of mother sentient being, he talks a lot on that. But for our case, we talk so much about sentient beings, but it's more like from the faults. And then we bring so much hatred. And then forget about compassion, that you really, there's time that you didn't want to see his face again. Even forget about the face, you see the shoes of that person that you got like quite vomiting, not because the shoes is stinky, but it's more about so much hatred is built in. So that's why the Bodhisattva Atiśa is teaching us how to gossip actually. Not to bring any hatred, jealousy. But then maybe we can talk about other people's faults, but not seeing them from their fault side. This is two different things. So that's why we normally always, our teachers always guide us and teach us saying, remind us actually saying, we should differentiate between the person and person's behavior. Don't mix things up. So that's the takeaway from that. We can talk about the behavior, but that behavior, that you cannot represent him. And if this bad behavior can be identification of that person, and what about his good qualities? He has also good qualities. Why his good qualities are not his identification? Then it is up to maybe your own way, how you wanted to look at it. So you choose the false side, and then you bring so much kind of negative emotions from your side. So that's it really disturbs your practice. And also your happiness, it will destroy. So this is a very great a kind of a instruction that we need to follow. Yes. This one? Da tene dagi yundem bacha shins. Da shinji chuba zigmes dagi yundem bawar chigins. Da namsha yundu belogarba shinji chuba ze. 야, tenen dagi yundem di mani katsu ten to ten ba. Ta di samlosh da ondu zambe jidane shinji chuba zeba 직 제가 세월배 치다 제가 생기 투벌 통바당 랑기 네바디 바 아니 배바 지구 교열에서 계제 디점십을 하면도 간제 생기 교연의 망고 제원도 준비 셴을 미게 안지 전섬다 타도다 콘로망고지 용야기 되직제 되네 랑래야 연된 뉴뉴 춘주지 마도 매나야 미션배 떠러서 당체 니 직도스랍도 좀 비시네 배 예의 춘주지 마도 요 말을 때 다시 볼지 소소배 캥바르지 레원도 좀배 제장가 디 아니 샘기 샘로 장랑만 로이 쳐도 아니 녀바도 되게 텐시 땡기인스 알하바도 단다 다기 연된 바자신 세야디 단다 로종 지란주다 로종 특기마 저 제 만체 제용여도 도좀 지게기 만나러야 아니 즉 가서래 지게 타마도 벌래 아니 와들 상회달 아니 직지지 세체 간제 매베 추기니 제국 요래 수수유 규규 연된도서 가진선나 때지게 칠로니 요 삼상지 캥발레원도 전배 캥발 남게바다 ngārgī nām gyāba thāng ngārān chūgī dhūlāi yuandēn yuñyā. Ani tā chidāni yuandēn sāwa jāngyā tā yīndā, ani kō chīgī dhūlī chīnlab chūyā lā gyāk chīshū chīnyā tī ngārgī tī chādi dhū sāmbē tī kātū yuñyā mā nēm tōba chī kūrē sīn tā labjā tī kyuñ kū sārē. Tā kī nyāba bācā shīn, ani shēngi yuandēn chābar chāgās. Tā shēngi yuandēn chāgā sāmbē shēngi shēnliya, ane kūpa ane gādīn tēnyāla sō tā tsū yung yorwa.
So here, the sort of looking at these lines here, where this in the verse 3, reveal your own shortcomings, do not seek out others' errors, conceal your own good qualities and proclaim those of others. But of course, it's quite opposite from the way we normally act. So we're always sort of seeking out and searching for the faults and mistakes and mistaken ways in others, and seeking them out and always looking to see them. They always seem to be evident to us. Whereas, and then in relation to ourselves, we're always even the smallest kind of quality that we have, we're always trying to sort of make it manifest, reveal that to others, to show that off to others. So this is our normal way of acting. So this advice, of course, is very different from that. And one of the ways that we do this is in terms of others. Others may really have good qualities. But so when we do, see some sort of good quality in others, then we immediately become competitive with them about this. We become jealous of them, and then relating that to ourselves, even though we may only have tiny qualities, we became bloated up with kind of self-confidence and sort of conceit and sort of pride about these what can be only a tiny fraction of qualities. And so with these advices to sort of help us to sort of not cheat ourselves and to sort of work on really turning this around. And this is also connects with one of the last verses of Geshe Langli Tampa's 8 verses of mind training, where he talks about in one of the in the last one of the last verses about secretly doing this sort of secretly, this process of doing it secrecy, so the sense of being kind of secretive about our own qualities and practice, rather than having to sort of always have to sort of
로정 스키메 대다 군이 취지 도베 팀에 마바신스 디게 타마데르샤.
And also the 8th verse, where it also says, "I will learn to keep all of these practices untainted by the thoughts of the 8 worldly concerns, and recognize all things as illusions, and without attachment gain freedom from bondage." But that way of also keeping these practices untainted by the thoughts. Untainted by the thoughts of the 8 worldly conceptions, but also, she mentioned, keeping these sort of secretly, sort of keeping this practice. So any sort of qualities that we do have, keeping them kind of secretly to ourselves and not getting caught up in the 8 worldly dharmas. And so, going with that, it says about recognizing all things as illusions, without attachment, gain freedom from bondage. So that those last 2 verses of the 8 verses of mind training also connect to this here.
I don't want to do money.
Yeah, so there's the 8 verses of mind training, not the 7-point mind training. It's the 8 verses of mind training. And then here, so having this way in which we have our sort of pride and kind of bloated up with our own pride in our own qualities, and having this habit and this way of sort of thinking and acting is something which is one of the main sort of things the main obstacles, the main thing which prevents the sort of blessings from entering our mind streams. And so instead of having this way, these instead of expressing our own good qualities and not respecting the qualities of others, we should conceal our own good qualities and proclaim those of others. We should have respect and gratitude towards others, and so this will help us to overcome overcome these ways of thinking.
Okay. So the very important thing is these great masters normally say the 8 worldly concerns or my pride really kind of bring down my practice. So this is something to take away in our practice. Normally when we understand and when if you feel I'm better than that person, how does that take away your practice? You need to give a thought on that. One of my teachers' very unique quality is when he hears any kind of that Lama is full of controversy or that Lama is so highly realized, doesn't matter, when he hears this teaching of that Lama, then he will fold his hand and say like, wow, this is incredible. This teaching is so good. So I always get amazed by his quality because he's really down to business. He's not really biased at all. So if you are really trying to develop something generate something, then it is nothing much to do with the person's personality much. It is more like what to take away from this. Because person we have to say goodbye. Even your guru or whoever, you need to say goodbye at the end. The quality or the teaching that what you are really looking for, that is something that has to stay forever for you, with you. It has to become part of you, this teaching. So that is the reason the great teachers always say that my pride is really disturbing my practices. This is something we need to watch our steps, how it is really disturbing us, our practice. 예단 고디 방자신 다 딘나시 딘나나 녀바다 고디 방자신 다데 어디바도 수냐 직 두르샤나다야. 오케이. 제정다 디나로네 녀바다 고디 방자신 캐바다 잡아 빵으로 차 세나 신시지. 아니 녀바다 고디로 소바데서 중원도 선배 아니 직 시스템 그 수나로야 가두이네 내가 펼치 아니 아자 친구 쉬우지 디 곰시디 앞에 개좀 쉬우지 인스 배 쉬운 알게디 쉬우지 펠용도 잠배 아니 녀바도 닝구르다 드졸이야 아니 레도 파 텔베토네 대고야디 아주 냠랭기야 내가 직 차원도 잠배 녀다 꾸디 방자신 아니 개바다 잡아다도 방을 쳤으디 아니 지기 고개라 친구 쉬우지랬으디 깨라기 제손 로데디 아니 파샤지 대용어뷰 토라야 수수 야고 치기 여담에 대용어뷰 토라 아니 고랑 수수기 삼로당만 신 냠렌지 강 로고 유메 따야 되다 가족이 가서래 shewa nala tai kaso dongpa taya di shewa yoba na xin nga rang zuyo nyomong ki lega di kachus chigidu chigimindu di ta nga rang zuyo ki chwe ki ta melong surup di la ta di samlo tangda lab nangdo wa.
And now sort of connecting that with verse 4, particularly the first two lines of verse 4, where itself in one of the translations it says, forsake wealth and ministrations, but perhaps we could say, forsaking wealth and let go of craving for gain and honor. And at all times relinquish game and fame, or give up the urge for profit and fame, let go of craving for gain and honor. So here, what happens to us is if we do get some sort of wealth, position of sort of power or of sort of good fame, then it really just kind of puffs us up and makes us feel very self-important, and it increases. It does nothing but increase our desires further, and also then our hopes, our fears, hopes, and expectations. And we should not follow after this sense of being famous. But checking to see if in reality we really a good person. Is our practice getting better? Like looking in a mirror to see whether, in the reflection in the mirror, to see whether our see like clearly like our faults and afflictions in the mirror.
Okay. So at this point, I remember one kind of instant or teaching happened in when I was studying in down south, a big monastery, now almost 20 years ago. So there's one elderly senior practitioner. So he always tells his students that why you are studying there in the monastery is not to get a title as a Geshe, to become a Geshe Lharamba, or the title of that. So then one of his student, very fantastic Geshe, one of the most learned one, in a young age he became a number one Geshe, but unfortunately he passes away. Then his certificate of a Geshe was put that on the wall, and then this senior practitioner, who is that person's teacher, he will always tell the students like, "Oh my goodness, the Geshe forget to take something with him. This title, this certificate, he forgot to take with him, which he is really fond of." But whether he is fond of that or not, it was like very solid teaching. Whether that as such a long time practicing there, what you really get it here, it really matters, not the title. But there should be some the rules and regulations or some kind of study level for sure, but main purpose of the practice shouldn't be left on that. So this is similar kind of teaching here saying that how much somebody praise you, somebody really admires your knowledge or something. Don't get away with that. Hold to your own horse and think how they praise, what do you have? That you really need to hold the position who that you really are. 제장가 캐다다도 뽕을 차세게 다디 내가 쳐보지. 되네 디기 돔들이야. 아니 되바 충시 초셰다. 딜라야다 뒤중 초셰세게 맹데 다시 되바 충로 초셰버지 제스. 아니 제일 진도 소월 차세다 다 디네마 신에 아니 창주 웃음 거르데다 슈처던 거래.
So just that last piece here, the text is, there are two versions of the text. So I'm following the one that is Tubjen Jimpa's translation, because the other translation from Lotsawa House has a slightly different Tibetan version. The versions are different in Tibetan, and therefore we have different translations. So forsaking wealth and administrations, and at all times relinquish gain and fame. And then it goes on to say in the text, have modest desires, be easily satisfied. So that relates to not getting, not getting full of greater desire when these things like wealth or gain and fame come to us, and in fact it incites us to forsake those completely. But having modest desires, being easily satisfied, and then it says reciprocate kindness. So reciprocate kindness here is sort of leading us on towards the sense of the sort of awakening mind of bodhicitta. It's also it starts to connect with love, compassion, and the mind of bodhicitta. So just the last piece. So we should not follow after these things such as our sort of hopes, expectations, and fears, and worries. We should not follow after, fame and wealth and those kind of positions of power of fame, but we should not get carried away with those things, but to see in reality who we really are, to see in reality whether we really are a good person, whether our practice is improving or not. So in this, to see whether we're filled with the negative emotions or not. So like looking in a mirror, which reflects back very clearly who we are. So you taking the Dharma as a mirror to sort of reflect on ourselves and to see who we are and to see the sort of real situation of we are, and not get carried away by the fact that we've received some profit or gain, or someone has paid us respect, or we've become famous. So making sure to not get carried away with those things, and then having modest desires, being easily satisfied. And then the next line connects us to compassion, love, and bodhicitta, where it says reciprocate kindness.
다 디 나로네 디파도 다 삼르스타나 기부 중요하게 초거르티 쳇디 나로라 땅 아란주 미지 야고지게야지 강토도 지기 개회 초라야 아니 지기 냠낸 체투비야지 체도 숭배 손로버 지글라 다 되네마 참저롱도 아니 딜야다 다 기부 중문에 기부 등제 기부 첨부를 봐도서 자롱도 선배 아니 제발 진도 서버 차세야 돼 제발 진도 서버 차세야 되게 당아란조 아니 균제 명화된 시제 배나 전주 심 개발을 아니 탑람마손 탑손로부터 마손은 이송제 아니 다신님제 주권의 셈께당당 균제 명화된 주권의 셈께당 송배 나네 아니 배나 균제 명화된 주권의 야 삼로 당원도 당보대 마르셰바 시두점배 때지게 개왕아마도 침마도 패전 요 조사를 삼상지게 잠을 내원도 점배 남식이 균들이 조단들 삼로 당원도 점배 개왕아마 침마도 요 초고래 슬람나 아니 시다 패전 semje tamje rang ma chi nyong ma nyong de le ya shada go gyumse yang se go ke me jo sun ji yo re da ma re she ba de le on du tambe 아니 tin wa da ma che chabe shu go ka din yo re se ya de le ri go shida go me jo sun ji de ga jo chi ha ko to be ta ka le ka shu na ge ka shu 하바도 진짜 맹아 등게 나로네 가종 가사 용서 저번 가사데 가는 가그리 슬랍도 잠베 아니 진소아들이다 다 거진 삼지메자와 가수지 예네야 가로진이 고 거진 삼도의 삼로 리그 말에 삼도의 삼로 레벨이네 아니 계단 경원이도 삼로 단제니 고 마신 데데야지 안쪽으로 여디 제장아 조지 번데 아디샤기 간지지기 수술이야 팬톱 제바당 텔이야 틸렌사비야기 아니 지 가서고래 곰시디 이양내한돈 잡아 제고리 시제데 조지기 랍지 첨부리 제바 진도 써와 잡았어
And
답변아 변화 솔이 가진 친구 중소나 변화 미지기 소소로 가진 친구 최소나 다 드리지 가진 친구 최소 단예간 진수지 소투버체나 삼로 되는지 거 딱고 양고 아주 마선 죽sem선로 마선에 강래야 내가 체간도나야 투모도 막 보이는 거 봐. 곰식 나올 때 가진지 섭토하고 섬에 디데고 그러다.
So here, if we sort of correlated how far we've sort of come in the text up to this point of it, so maybe having modest desires, being easily satisfied, that kind of thing, then up to here is sort of correlate that with the three scopes of practitioners as presented often in the Lamrim text. Then this would be sort of, we would correlate most of the practices here with the sort of smaller scope, and perhaps the sort of being sort of positive states of mind, more connected to sort of, developing in this life more positive states of mind, virtuous and positive states of mind, and that would be, leading to a better result in the future. So that maybe correlate to the smaller scope, perhaps leading into the middle scope. But here, what we would see here, when Atiśa says to us here, reciprocate the kindness, is this starts to bring in more of a sort of the aspect of the higher scope, where so that here which we could connect with this when we have these two particular paths of practice or methods in which we are able to cultivate and generate bodhicitta, the 7-point cause and effect instruction, and then the equalizing and exchange of self and others. Then particularly within the 7-point cause and effect instruction, where we have, first of all, the first point of knowing all sentient beings to have been our mothers at some point. So this, of course, very difficult to get full ascertainment of that, because that understanding relies to some extent on the idea of the existence of past and future lives. So if we have the sort of mental framework where we think, well, I think it's quite possible that there are past and future lives. I think it's quite realistic and possible, and therefore from that thought we can say that there is nobody who we have not had the experience of that person acting as a dear one, in particular as our mother. And then we contemplate that again and again and get some sense of the sort of experience of all beings of having acted as our mother at some point. And then the second point in the 7-point cause and effect instruction, where we remember the kindness. Now, I think in this point of remembering the kindness, I don't think there needs to be too much explanation of that if we've understood. If we can sort of look around us to see examples of the remembering the kindness. But then the next point out of the 7 points, the next point, I think, is one of the biggest sort of sticking points, the most sort of difficult points, is that of actually repaying the kindness, and sort of, even if we understand to some extent that we can sort of remember or bring to mind the kindness that they've done, and however much we sort of have the measure of that, there's a sort of a resistance to that almost. That there's something that inside of us that doesn't want to, that is sort of resist to repay the kindness. So maybe some kind of self over self-evaluation, or so perhaps some jealousy or something, or there's something that prevents us from really wishing to engage in actually sort of actively repaying the kindness. So the repaying of the kindness is something that has to become a habit for us. We need to apply ourselves to that again and again. And sort of having that sense of, wouldn't it be wonderful if I was able to repay the kindness? In the same way, we have a sort of, and when we talk about the engaging bodhicitta, the aspirational bodhicitta, but then the actual practice of actually doing the practices which then are count as a sort of engaging bodhicitta. There's also, to some extent, it's more difficult to sort of think about it, but then to actually put it into practice, there seems to be some sort of obstacle or resistance to doing that. So we remember the kindness, but it's difficult for us to actually really actively engage in repaying the kindness. So that, I feel, connects here to the line here about reciprocating the kindness, the last line of verse 4, where it talks about reciprocating the kindness. I feel that connects now to this topic of the 7-point cause and effect instruction, and therefore to the higher scope of beings.
제상가 다전다 준제 맹아 둥기 나로네 둘주줍치 두도와 제가 마르셰바디 마르셰바다 첸참바니디 아니 단다 숨바디기 아니 제바 텐도 소와차세디 그 슈기 땡기요로 찾아 다 디슈고들이야 제바 텐도 소바 제기 삼로데 망볼레 온도 참베 아니 야바르도 아니 영혼기 참바디 기보 온도 참베 올 참당세디 참바디 세도 참베 지단의 참바다 이도원의 참바세 즉 예와지 치기열 때 이도원아 세도 참베 릉신기 즉 셈다니고 시우지 차차 남샤 준도 디 동에다 대화다 대나 치마로냐 비 삼로지 깨바디 저기 냐랑로 소바다다 즉 참마로 연구요 봐 이네 델야 마르셰바다 텐템바 진 소의 삼로도 슈치모 질레 온도 잠베 디기 슈기 아니 심지엔 컨데지 통배 있나야 저 지부지 셈다니고 통원도 잠베 아니 콜리아 가르쳐 그래 그 대화도 되는 지마롱 냐베기 삼로도 슈칭부 시워질레 온기 스레 베낭냐망 알아줘도 초강 디가란 알아려야 밀랑 이신기 누비 땀세죠 공부루르기 송 되게 나로려야 아주 전제 제외값이야 아니 디나로를 심진기 거든지 마직 송샤도 집에 딱디 초고로 용조도 디레도가 심진기 거든 냥냥 송돼야지 뉴스에 가로 전행을 다 가시질 중요한 미신 하랑 셈나로라 다 드린 되네 마직 로산의 미직 투수나 직 탐고 투지 체스라고 삼삼로지 셈다니 뭐지 정신기 리그와 나 남샤진도 고 삼로디 거르자가 매비 인장 아니 거든 침부르비선 레스 아니 동에다 제발지 되기도 세마도 지금 이도 원와스도 좀 그게 초통도 좀 심진을 통도 좀 아니 셈다니 뭐 쉬우주에 되게 심진도 통과 다 한조라 어디 간데스 경고도 쓰도 고준제 명아 든세웠나 신식에 당보도 같이 마르셔바다 같이 진정바 되게 진의 선도의 삼로를 트렌드 선도의 삼로를 온도 좀 신의 이원의 장바디 예원체 아니 디대와데 되나 치마롱 냐베 삼로들 레온도 이원의 장바세 되는 닝지디 디원도 좀 닌지 친구들이 니지 첨부도 가는 동해 딘디지 대화 슉 첨부 넌데유베 사바데기 동해 딘디지 통배나 민데베 삼로래 원도 삼베 딘디 동해 디 충중지가 마야야디 네 최고 세워도 잠베 다 쿨렌체 딘디 잠베 아니 닝지 첨부 세데 디게 원도 잠베 다 단다 균제 맹아 듄기 나로네 둔바데 전주 셈데 차요를 때 족파도 균제 맹아된 조당되기 가르축 자구도 쓰나 닝지 첨부 슉 깨당지 슉슉 잡은 거래요. 대인도 전명 알아서 그 뒤에 균제 맹아 듄기 삼로 세디 전주 셈께 지구 체도 마연바 닝지 따고 잡아야지 닝지 슉 쳐로 다니지다 닝지 첨부디 남양 파치 가르서래 따고 자야라 균제 맹아 듄 삼로디 녀버도 고고요. 저산 디나로라 닝지 공자 싱스 들이 중보이나 전주 셈네 땜바르 차서 전주 셈 땜부 차에 인버렸습니다. 밀음이 신우비 땀세죠. 밀음이 땀세죠. 그래서 냐면 계란 요리. 야.
So here, sort of connecting. So then, so connecting here with the 7-point mind training and this understanding of knowing all the sentient beings to have been our mothers, and here sort of knowing the sentient beings to our mothers and then remembering their kindness and wishing to repay the kindness. I think that could what is happening here is I believe that the 7-point cause and effect instruction is being implicitly stated here. It's not so exactly explicit, but reciprocating the kindness could include the first 3 points of the 7-point cause and effect instruction, that of knowing all beings to have been our mother, remembering or understanding, knowing the kindness, recollecting the kindness of them, and then wishing to repay the kindness. So all of those 3 could perhaps be included in this line, the last line of verse 4, reciprocate the kindness. And if we sort of contemplate again and again this wish to repay the kindness and understand the need for that, then also the next point of the 7-point cause and effect instruction is that of affectionate love. And we have to sort of clearly differentiate ordinary kind of love from this affectionate kind of love. Here, the affectionate love, a sense of seeing other sentient beings appearing sort of in a very attractive or affectionate way to us, very close way, really has this sense of with the affectionate love, you have this real sense of being very close to them from the initial points of the development of the practice, and then you feel already have this strong sense of closeness to them, and then with that strong sense of affection, that strong sense of an affectionate love is this mind which wishes, wouldn't it be wonderful if they had all the happiness, and so the power of the first 3 points of knowing the beings to be our mother, remembering their kindness and wishing to repay their kindness, the power and strength of that helped to inform this wish, the strong wish of affectionate love that all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. And so whatever sentient being we see, that mind sees them as being very close to us, and wishing them to have happiness. And indeed, in this very temple, I think it was last year, in this very temple, I taught on a teaching by text by Nagarjuna called the Dream Tale. And in that text, the Dream Tale, there are many reflections on the kindness of sentient beings. And I don't know about other members of the audience, but for me, after we'd been doing that text, then really I had this strong sense in my mind of after the teaching had finished and sort of go outside or something, of really wishing to sort of hug other sentient beings and thank them for their kindness. So, and sort of, you wish them to thank them for their kindness and wish them to have happiness. So that sort of wish sees the sentient beings from their side as being very close to us, and then so that's sort of that affectionate love which wishes the sentient beings to have all the kinds of happiness. And then you come to the next point of the 7-point cause and effect, which is the compassion, but not just compassion, but great compassion. And the great compassion that wishes that sentient beings really have not even even the smallest form of suffering. But also is not just that, but that taking the responsibility that I will help them to be free of all, even the smallest forms of suffering, to help them remove to be free from all of those sufferings. And then so the great compassion, and great compassion as the fifth point of the 7-point cause and effect instruction, then, or in fact up to sort of altruistic intent, or the special superior altruistic intent, which is the point number 6. Up to that point, they are all, of course, the causes of then the 7th one, which is the awakening mind. So I think here, if you look in the text in verse 5, we can see then the first 3. Then we cultivate love, which is the 4th point, is sort of affectionate love. Then you have the compassion, and then it mentions cultivate love and compassion and stabilize your awakening mind. So then, with the power of great compassion, in fact, of the power of the first 6 causes, then that helps us to take hold of, with those taken hold of us, we're able to develop the bodhicitta, which is strong and stable.
Okay. So now, as a homework, one time when I was receiving a teaching from my teacher, so my teacher said yesterday when he went to a class, debate class, then a student asked him a question, which was very difficult to answer. He asked a question regarding bodhicitta, that the bodhicitta is for the benefit of others. So with this mindset, what is there for you? So because the student asked this question, when there are so many answers, but the student's question and my teacher's question, such a long time, comes together with thinking, with it related to the practice, saying, how much you say that we need to give the fully enlightened to sentient being, we need to take the full responsibility. But if you don't feel I will get something out of there, no way you're going to do that. So that is, whether you call it self-cherishing, self-grasping, anything, but if you cannot give a kind of answer to that, such a benefit is for yourself. You need to answer that. So my teacher asked me a question. He checked with me. I was like, you are asking a wrong guy. But anyway, through that, my investigation, every time when I talk about bodhicitta, I'm always trying to focus on it's so great, this text, in the Dumbani, two expressions. It says very clearly, Rangdun dan Shendun Sirwa, Rangdun Shugu, Shendun Sugu. How to say that?
So the Dharmakaya or the Dharma body for the welfare purposes aims of oneself, and the Rupakaya, the form body, which is for the purposes of aims of others.
If we could bring Dharmakaya for yourself, and we don't need to focus to become a fully enlightened, the Rupakaya, then this is a little bit much better than a liberation, and you get a fully enlightenment, and then you can have your own lifestyle. So this, my teacher said, who did this kind of behavior, this kind of research? Partika Buddha. So this exists, this way of style. So even though they tried such a put effort, they cannot bring Dharmakaya. Why? Dharmakaya and the Rupakaya comes together. So that was something. So anyway, you give a thought on this. Even I have given quite few hints. I'm so kind, very generous. But please give a thought. So then tomorrow morning, when we go through the refuge in Bodhicitta, and then there's in the verse it says, I take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, 3 jewels, until the fully enlightenment, all this practice of generosity and so on, for the sake of the sentient being, I will attain fully enlightenment. Something like that. Very bad English, but this is the same meaning. So when you say this, then you have some feeling. Otherwise, it will be so dry. Because how much you say, I wanted to help sentient beings, so on, but deep inside, if you don't feel, I can get something out from there, it's a human nature. We will never move an inch. So this is something a student asked my kind teacher, and then my teacher gave this question, and it really stays very strongly here. So this is what I share, and then you also practice that. Thank you very much. Rangdun Shugu, Shendun Sugu. Rangdun Shugu, Shendun Sugu. Dīmbāñi kare. Kare dīmbā. Mara, dārāng rē. Dīmbā dīrī. Rāngdūyān dāng, shāndūyān nīgī dī, dīmbāñi sīlā rwa. Dōpa dīrwa. Dōpa dō dīmbāñi jīgwa rwa. Dōpa dīrī dā. Pīchīng jīrī. Tāndā dīgirī sīlā shū. Shūgul tāshū rwa.
So here we were talking about these bodhicitta, the sort of components of bodhicitta. There are two main components to bodhicitta. There are 2 what we would call aspirations, wishes, or desires to some extent, although desire maybe not the right word, but the sort of wishes or aspirational wishes. One is the aspirational wish, which is to attain enlightenment, but very specifically to attain the Dharmakaya, the Dharma body of the Buddha, which is a sort of completeness of one's own sort of welfare, or is said to be the complete accomplishment of one's own aims or welfare. And then the second aspiration is the aspiration for the aspiration for sentient beings, and that aspiration is the aspiration to achieve the Rupakaya, the form body of the Buddha, which is said to be the body of the Buddha for the welfare purposes and aims of others. So very implicitly within the mind of bodhicitta itself, it's composed of these two sort of aspirational wishes or sort of aims or purposes.
Thank you. The Dubani di Chana Tse. So you search what are the two karsa aspirations. When I Yagi checked with me, something came up. There's a Tibetan there is a way of saying that one person asked, or some of the people, and then before he wanted to boastful, he would make sure that nobody went to Tibet. So he said, anybody went to Tibet? Then they said no. So then he feel very comfortable and say, now I can say whatever I want. Similarly, we not much having idea what are the two inspiration. At the moment, I can say anything. So you check, and then if I'm wrong, please give me this offering. Thank you. Okay, so now we do the dedication.
אני עושה אוקיי, אני אתחיל את זה בעברית ואחרי זה נעבור לטיבט. אוקיי. So people at home, we will now say our dedication prayers. We will say them in Hebrew, but at the end, we will recite together with Rinpoche the dedication for bodhicitta. בזכות חסד זה להוסיף במהרה את מצב הגבורה בודה, ולהוביל למצב זה את כל המודדים עד אחד. לו תודעת הערה אליה תקרת הערך שטרם נודע תיבנה. לו זו שנודע לא תתנוון ותזכה עוד ועוד. כמו שמנג'ושרי אז הרוח וגם סמנטה בדרה ראו נכוחה את הדברים כפי שכך הקדיש אפנה את כל פוטנציאל הזכות הזה בדרך הטובה ביותר. לו יהיו הם לי למופת. הקדיש את כל חיוביות השורש הזאת שלי ושל אחרים, בהקדשה שכל הכובשים החולפים מעבר בשלושת הזמנים, היללו רק הטובה ביותר. לו יהיו בכוחי לעסוק במעשה הבודיסטווה הנעלים. ולאריכות ימיו של הדלאי למה. לא זה, סליחה, רגע. בארץ זו המוקפת ריחסי הרי מושלגים, מכל רווחה ואושר ללא יוצא מן הכלל, אבל לא כתשווה רב העוצמה תזין גייצו, לא תוותר עד קץ הקיום. צ'אנצ'ו סנצ'ו rinpoche, Magevana Gyuji, Gevanya Madevayo, Gone Gondo Blewacho. De la Falmantasha. Okay. Di perché me di אוקיי. ריבוצ'ה גם רוצה שנאמר את בית ההקדשה הזה. באמצעות פוטנציאל זכות זה להשיג את מצב ידיעת הכל. אביס את אויביי, קמאי, להשחרר את הנודדים מאוקיינוס הקיום שגלה בעצומים סוערים בזקנה, חולי ומוות. Invece non di Jumbo Paoli, ci da che batandingo di dungo yana. Di viene ya che sono da. La so, c'è da di. Già, sono in ambiente.